That's just mind blowing to me how
Yeah,
you sort of went from writing about your dad,
yeah,
who I think appears very minimally now
yeah,
in these
yeah, yeah,
books,
yeah,
to sort of writing about your grandmother
yeah,
and wanting to do the ethical thing of protecting the people we love in our stories.
yeah,
You decided to shift to the larger biography of place.
yeah.
I find it so amazing. How did you, what role does place, sort of occupy in your writing imagination? Why
Mm,
place? Because you could have been writing about birds outside the context of place.
mm.
You could have been writing, yeah, but you're just so deeply into place. How did that happen as a writer?
Um, I, I don't know that it was. It did sort of just happen. It wasn't like a deliberate decision on my part. In part, like nature takes place in context, right? History takes place in
Yes,
context,
that's true.
and so, and I've been moving as an adult from place to place, and when I find myself in a different place, I'm interested in that place, in those sort of spaces. Like, what is the history of this place? The natural history. What are the creatures, the other beings that I share this space with? And so the
Yes.
birds show up, and the
Yes.
fish, and like all these things show up. And also, I'm like, well, what is the sort of the human story here? So when I'm in Bemidji, like the second book sort of explores, sort of moving around, but also northern Minnesota. And in northern Minnesota, when I showed up there in May of 2003, I felt very conspicuous. Yeah, they're not there. There were not a lot of black folk there.
Yeah.
And having moved from Houston, Texas, going from Georgia to Houston, Texas to northern Minnesota was really kind of, I experienced culture shock. It was a little like, oh, the look of this place is very different in so many ways.
Yeah.
And so that is sort of how I understand place. And then I was sort of wanting to figure out, like, well, who was here? I happened across, when I was wandering around Bemidji one day, I happened across a flyer for a lecture about a black voyager. And that's a simplification of who this person was. But I was like, oh, there's a black voyager here. Let me find out about this guy. And the lecture was like, a couple of weeks out. And I was like, I can't wait. I need to find out. And so I went directly to the Historical Society and I was like, I need to know whatever you have about this guy. And they're like, we don't know of this guy.
Oh my goodness.
But we do have a file on another black guy, since you seem to be interested in black guys. And so they turned me on to this guy, Charles Scrutcheon, who was a lawyer who moved there in 1898 or so like 100 years before I moved to
Oh my
Bemidji. This guy
goodness.
moved up there, and I was like, I'm just learning about him and getting a sense of like what his life was in this space and sort of how he ended up there. If I remember correctly, I think his mother was from Georgia. And yeah, so just sort of tracking his life to getting to Bemidji. I think they ended up leaving the South after the Civil War and being raised in Washington State, I think it was, and then he ended up going to law school in Michigan, all of these things.
Ooh.
Yeah, he's an interesting figure, and ended up, sort of settling in Minnesota, first in Minneapolis, and then at the time of sort of, race men and sort of community unity, like the lawyers in the cities were like, you're new, we're glad you're here, but we kind of have this place saturated and we could actually use sort of an ambassador, someone out in Bemidji. And so he took the train north to Bemidji and practiced law in Bemidji for like 30 years.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and was part of some major cases, and he's how I ended up learning about, I think I'd heard about it, I'd seen some postcards actually from this particular lynching, but I didn't know he was attached to it. I just sort of knew of it, and I was like, oh, he defended one of the men who had to stand trial after the lynching, who weren't lynched for a crime that they did not commit. And so just sort of like his, what he did with law and his involvement with law in the early 19th century in Minnesota was fascinating to me.